Good morning. My name is John Davis, and I'm Chief Executive of CPA UK, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association UK. And I'm delighted to have with me this morning Matthew Hamlyn. Matthew, welcome.
Welcome and good to talk to you again, John. I'm Matthew Hamlyn. I'm Strategic Director of the Chamber Business Team in the House of Commons, and my role in the Virtual Commons has been to coordinate all the very clever expert people on the technological side, the broadcasting side, the procedural side, to try and mesh them all together to deliver a reasonably coherent hybrid service to members. I've got a particular responsibility for activities in the chamber, hence my job title. There's been a whole load of work going on virtual select committees as well, which I have an engagement with, but I'm not in charge of because it's just sort of happening. But I'm very happy to cover select committees as well if that's interest.
Matthew, that's a huge range already, and we've been talking with some of the members who've been, as it were, the participants and beneficiaries of that. What would you say, given that central role you've had, what are some of the sort of key moments and decisions that that you've been through in the past few weeks on that?
I suppose the first really key decision, which was still less than 2 months ago, was on the 24th of March, when the House approved a resolution allowing remote participation by MPs in select committees, which never happened before. And within 2 days, we had our first more or less completely virtual select committee evidence session. And then those virtual select committees carried on right through our Easter recess period, in particular scrutinising the health minister on the emerging COVID-19 crisis. So I think the committees sort of were trailblazers. And I think once they'd done that, it was pretty clear there was going to be pressure for the chamber to be able to do something similar. Yeah. And so the speaker and the clerk of the House were getting letters and emails from members of Parliament saying, you need to be able to deliver some kind of virtual chamber. And the speaker formally wrote to the clerk of the House on the 31st of March saying, by the time the House comes back, I want members to be able to take part virtually in questions to ministers and statements, because they need to be able to deliver their scrutiny function. And John Benger asked me to coordinate various work streams on that. So that was a big event. I think there were a couple of big meetings with the House of Commons Commission, with the Speaker, trying to work out what the government wanted, because obviously they have a legitimate interest too. So the two big events, I mean, so a huge amount of work was done over the Easter recess, particularly by the broadcasters, who had to work out a way of, in effect, taking video conferencing like this and turning it into broadcastable product.
Yeah.
So I think I said somewhere else that it's a bit like taking making a TV studio out of the chamber, but then rather than having a cast of 6 like you might have on a Zoom call, you have 600, or maybe not all 600 at once, but quite a lot.
And Matthew, in that, it sounds like quite early on, obviously some parliaments have gone for sort of an entirely virtual version, and some have gone for the hybrid. Was that ever a significant option or a significant decision for Westminster?
The Speaker said right from the beginning, and the Leader of the House has said this, there's always a sort of inalienable right for members to attend Parliament. It goes back to the 14th century, and the Leader of the House has quoted that more than once. What the Speaker was keen to do was make clear that there was no advantage, particularly in coming in. Yeah. You wouldn't get calls just by turning up and sitting in the chamber. But there was no advantage, particularly in staying at home. He was quite neutral in that respect, because it was a way of ensuring that with one of his other hats on as chair of the commission, and therefore having responsibility for kind of the estate and safety, that we could manage the numbers on the estate. We could do our bit for ensuring that people could work from home, not travel, and thereby obey government guidance. Yeah. And also, quite simply, to keep numbers down in the chamber, which lots and lots of parliaments throughout the world have had to do. Yeah. So the hybrid model was always sort of there. When the House came back on the 21st of April, we passed a resolution with the first day back without notice, which allowed for the first hybrid question time the following morning. And then on the 22nd of April, we passed a further resolution which extended hybrid proceedings to other business, second readings of bills, or other legislation, general debates, and so on. So fairly quickly, and then the following week, we moved into legislation because the government had said its red line was it needs to continue its legislative programme.
Yeah.
The other big decision was changing how we vote, because fully physical voting, particularly when many members don't wish to come to Westminster or are unable to because they're shielding for medical or other reasons, it wasn't practicable. Yeah. And at some stage, you need to be able to have votes on controversial political stuff. Yeah. So we, my colleagues in the digital service, devised and tested a system which allows members to vote anywhere where they have web access and can log on to our existing sort of member hub portal. And we've used that several times. We've had 4 remote votes now as well. And that gets round the difficulty of physically distanced, safe voting in our traditional Westminster system, as many of your viewers will know, involves several hundred people queuing through a cramped corridor, which is probably not particularly compliant with health and safety at the moment.
Yeah, and it's been interesting talking to members and some of these conversations about just how significant a change that's been, all the things you've been through, and that's all happened, as you say, in a matter of weeks. And if you look back over that still short period of time, is there anything that's particularly surprised or particularly sort of pleased you with how it's gone?
I think some of the surprising things are the speed with which literally centuries-old practices, which we regarded as sort of absolutely baked into the fabric of our constitutional arrangements, could just be discarded in a time of crisis. And that goes, and that I think is a reflection of the way society has changed. It's hardly surprising, but parliaments, particularly very old ones like Westminster, get into the habit of thinking that change is impossible because we keep telling each other it is, and it turns out not to be the case. So in a very minor way, we're just dealing with much less paper. Parliaments are fantastically good at generating paper and moving it around. Obviously, with most people participating virtually, and by which I mean most staff are working, certainly on the chamber-facing side, the committee-facing side, most staff are working remotely, working at home, and only coming in when they need to service, meetings of the chamber or committees. I think remote voting, I was convinced at the beginning, during the Easter recess, would never happen. It was important to do the work on it because it would be due diligence. But suddenly the leader of the House says, I want this as soon as possible. Yeah. And he's one of the most proudly traditional parliamentarians we have. So that was unexpected. I think nice things that happened, I think the extent to which members appreciated it. We had a letter from one member to the leader, to the clerk of the House, saying, you must deliver a virtual parliament by the time the House comes back. And we took a deep breath and said, well, that's a bit of a challenge, chaps. And then she wrote to us more recently saying, I never thought you'd actually do it. So she's just been so that sort of personal feedback has been particularly appreciated.
No, absolutely. And we've heard that in these conversations and others, Matthew, and big congratulations to you and all involved. It's been very impressive to watch from us Parliament watchers have been fascinated, but also hugely impressed by, and as you say, by the huge team effort across all the various functions that you mentioned has been extraordinary, actually.
I think that's the other thing which has pleased me. I mean, you know very well, John, that things only get done by really good collaborative teamwork. We have value, one of the House of Commons sort of values is around collaboration and trust and things like that. It's a reminder that in a crisis, they're even more important. You have really to trust your colleagues, realize how many people are involved. So it's quite interesting. Number of people come to us saying, I want to talk to your digital service about your virtual parliament. And we say, you should also talk to our clerks, to our broadcast team, all the new jobs we've invented overnight to support all this, but also to our estates and facilities teams. There was a whole load of kit had to be delivered and installed over a bank holiday weekend. I mean, you have to spend money, you have to get your procurement right, this kind of stuff. You just need to do it really fast. Yeah. And reminding how many people in this great supportive web are involved in doing things. And that's been very refreshing. And the kind of collaboration we see and the kind of some of those behaviors have been fantastic.
No, I agree. And I think it's when one sees some of the return on investment in those things over previous times, doesn't it? Including the leadership and how an organisation works. I think that's absolutely right. You said a little bit, Matthew, about how not just jobs have changed, but almost new roles have had to be invented. From those traditional roles, particularly of what people think of as a clerk in the chamber, is some of it still there?
Well, some of it's still there. So that we've changed. So rather than if you watch question time in the Commons, you won't see 3 clerks in a row at the beginning of. We have one, because we reckon one clerk sitting in the sort of, as it were, the right-hand seat from the Speaker's point of view is just about 2 meters away from anyone else. As long as they sit in the right places, they're just about 2 meters away from the Speaker, as long as you don't lean backwards. So that role, and we still record formally the decisions of the House. We don't write them in a minute book. Right. We are using a laptop which has got a draft of that day's minutes of proceedings, which we amend and update as we go along in real time in SharePoint. So my colleagues who are in the Journal office preparing the formal record will be doing that usually from their houses.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, it's a minor ritual of the world of clerk. Traditionally, when you used to gather around the vote writer, whose job it was to finalise all this, and check through everything in a very sort of physical, sort of in a huddle, and then you do the same thing to sign off the next day's order paper. Yeah. That is now done, over calls like this.
Yeah.
And
as you say, and that's something presumably which is where something has shifted in weeks that had evolved over probably literally centuries.
And these are things which we all knew we could do more digitally, but there's never been quite the burning platform to do it. But we've also created new roles. So there's a whole bunch of people whose job it is to be contacting members and setting them up for their video calls, queuing them in, engaging with the broadcast team, who have a new modern. Traditionally, the broadcast team have managed cameras pointing at members in one big room, and they do it brilliantly. They've had to now do that as well, with feed coming in from all sorts of people, members on their their laptops, their iPads, whatever they've got, and trying to make sure that's a broadcastable quality. But it's a whole team of people who are supporting that, and they are from all over the House service. We put out a general call, and they work shifts in the broadcast hub, and for them, the skills you need are really good interpersonal skills, talking to members, reassuring them, working out what they need, and also good calmness under pressure, very good quick judgment, getting on well. But these are all kind of classical skills of anyone who's delivering whatever outcomes you need for an organization.
Yes. But it's testament to the flexibility of people being able to do that. But it's been very impressive to watch, as I say. Matthew, you've kindly been sharing. I know you've been involved in some of the sharing with other parliaments. Any particular sort of insights or things that have struck you when you've been comparing notes or sharing what we've been doing with other parliaments around CPA and more generally?
Well, I think as ever, and as you know, John, your viewers may not, I used to be head of the Overseas Office in the House of Commons. So I had a bit of an idea of the extraordinary range of how parliaments do things differently, but also there's always a few common factors that come up. But I think 2 observations. One is, for some parliaments, well-resourced, quite big, already maybe a bit down this route. The Brazilian National Congress is a really good example. And they've surged ahead on a very digital approach. And they have a remote voting app or solution, which is very, very advanced. It has facial recognition in it, for instance. So you have to basically, if you're an MP, you take a photograph of yourself on your phone every time you start a voting round. Right. So there's an extra level of authentication. It also, perhaps more entertainingly, has a leadership guidance tab. So, this is presumably known as the virtual whip. I don't know. Yes. It's not a feature we've built into our system. We've not been asked to.
No, we had an interesting conversation with this series with one of the Labour whips, Chris Elmore, who was still looking ahead to what modern whipping might be like in the new system.
Well, actually, I know Chris because he's on the procedure committee, and we've regularly talked procedure as we've gone along. At the other end of the scale, the challenge of small parliaments, often with not necessarily a lot of administrative autonomy. So quite often, as you know, they're, if not subsidiaries of government, they will get their funding from the Treasury. There will be very strong executive control, not over the Parliament in democracy, but often over the literally the administration, the funding.
Yeah.
And that lack of autonomy problematic. I think on top of that, very strict constitutional requirements can cause problems. I think it was a CPA seminar the other week, I think it was, where we and possibly, I'm going to say Tynwald now, but it might have been Jersey, but I can't remember. We're saying, well, it helps that we have our own standing orders, and by and large, we can not quite do what we like.
Yeah.
But whereas other parliaments, you know, their powers derive from a legal basis.
Yeah.
Which means that they, even rules like does the mace have to be on the table? It's almost
Yeah.
a decision for the constitution. Whereas, and that's a challenge. A lot of the questions I was asked in a previous seminar was around those.
Yes.
Do you have to have a speaker's possession? Do you have to have the mace on the table? What about these rules? And we're saying, well, we do. I don't think we need to. It's not written down anywhere, but there's no reason not to.
No, absolutely.
And also the obvious final challenge is for some parliaments, they are very small, they have no money, and as someone said right at the end of a big event the other day, we have the hurricane season coming. Yeah. So this is just one more thing on, I'm thinking particularly my colleagues who are secretaries general, who have to keep the show on the road under quite for us quite unimaginable circumstances. So
no, absolutely.
I'm really impressed by them achieving any meetings at all in some circumstances.
Absolutely, and it's one reason why I think the CPA is a very good network to be sharing this on, because as you say, between the very different challenges that a big traditional parliament that you have and many of the others around the Commonwealth, where it's a very different challenge, but I think sharing what we are all learning from this experience is already proving useful, and will continue to.
And on the subject of sharing, one of the things, and I'm sort of moving towards the end, if that's all right, because I've got another meeting about to start. With us, it's also sharing with the House of Lords.
Of course.
Another thing that sets us apart from some, but not all other CPA parliaments, is that we're bicameral.
Yeah.
And that has been really interesting because the House of Lords has adopted a different approach to us for all sorts of reasons. The most fundamental thing they're wrestling with is their demographic. The average age of the House of Lords is about 70.
Yes.
Which is just the point where, government guidance in the UK from the various different medical health authorities, is that's when you should be really looking after yourself. You really should be thinking quite hard about leaving your house. And of course, there are other members of the House of Lords who are much older than that. So they are, really big on the Lord Speaker has been chairing proceedings virtually.
Yes.
Our Speaker has been chairing them physically. So there's all sorts of challenges there. The debate is going on in the Commons now about how long we should maintain virtual proceedings. The order to make them work formally lapses, when the recess starts.
Yes.
The Lords, however, is continuing down the virtual hybrid track. And our select committees are continuing to be virtual, but with probably increasing physical participation as time goes on, as we find safe ways of doing it.
Yeah.
And then, if we do start having more members coming back onto the estate, the next round of challenges will be delivering a safe estate, delivering safe physical proceedings in the chamber, and in legislation committees, and just in the kind of corridors and all those social spaces which parliamentarians really rely on to get politics done. As you know, it doesn't happen in the chamber or in the committee. A lot of the time it happens, you catch it in the corridor, in the canteen, as you're walking to the car park, and all that stuff happening. As we discovered in our personal lives, our domestic lives, our family lives.
Yeah.
So parliaments aren't exempt from that.
Not at all.
And it continues to be, at one level, quite an interesting challenge. I don't think anyone has worked harder in recent weeks than I can remember in my 30 years in Parliament. I think that probably goes a lot of members of Parliament have been having to deliver their constituency services in a totally different way.
Yes.
Members of the public have not stopped wanting their MPs, more so than ever, I think.
Absolutely not. No, we've heard that. That's been one of the common strands from talking to members wherever they are, whichever party. been an increase in volume and complexity quite often. Matthew, thank you so much for your time today.
Not at all.
It's much appreciated, and congratulations again to everyone involved in that effort. And perhaps we'll come back and talk again when the next evolutions have gone through in a few more weeks' time. But for now, thanks very much.
I'd be delighted to do that. Thanks very much, John. Good luck. Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye.